welcome to the A310. We're located here on stand 25 in Ibiza. Ibiza is one of the islands in the chain of Balearic Islands located in the Mediterranean. It's actually one of the smallest of the Balearic Islands. It's an island known for its party-style atmosphere, and generally it's one of those islands that people travel from all over the world. So today, what are we going to be talking about? We are going to be focusing on some history of the A310, and then we're going to talk about why you should be excited to fly the A310 in Microsoft Flight Simulator. Finally, we're going to move on to what the rest of this video series is going to be about, which is going to be about teaching you how to fly the A310. But without further ado, let's get on with the video. Okay, let's talk about the history of the A310, because I think it's one of the most important Airbus aircraft ever made. That's a bold statement, but I'm going to back it up. The A310 first flew in 1982, was introduced into service in 1983, with a mission of being a wide-body, two-engine, long-range aircraft. And it achieved those goals with a 12,000 kilometer range, which is around about 5,000 nautical miles. Now, why is the A310 such an important Airbus? It introduced three major changes to airliners and Airbus themselves. One of them was a two-person flight deck. So gone are the days of having 3 or 4 people in the flight deck for these long-range flights. You only had 2. That's a massive step up. Also, the instrumentation. It started using a glass cockpit. Now, a glass cockpit is where you display the information to the pilots by screens. Now, that was a huge change for the 1980s. I mean, really, really dramatic. And these screens are what we know today in modern Airbus aircraft, and are very similar, in fact, to ones found in the A320, but that all started here. And the final one is they came up with the lights out concept. Now, what this is basically, if you see any white lights on the overhead, that means they're in the wrong position. So you need to turn them on for them to be in the correct position. Now, this core logic carries itself all the way through to the A380 and A350 today, and that all started with the A310. Now, I could talk about the A310 for literally hours. We're going to leave it there, and we're going to take a look at the aircraft itself now. Let's take a closer look at some of the exterior details on the A310. As you can see in the tail area, we've got these kind of like, they look almost like heavy rivets. Maybe that's a bad description, but the tail of the aircraft actually in the real A310 looks just like this. So we've modeled the same here with the sort of not quite a smooth finish as the rest of the aircraft, and I think it looks absolutely fantastic. Now, if we take a quick look up at the fin on the A310, you'll notice there's lots of dirt and grime all over the aircraft. Now, we wanted to strike a balance of having an aircraft that looks well used but not overly worn, and I think we've really met that balance with the A310, and you're going to see this throughout the rest of the aircraft, and I'll try and point out some of those wear items that we've added in to make the aircraft really come to life. So if we move forward along the fuselage and to the wing, you'll notice at the end of the wing we have what is commonly referred to as a raked wingtip fence, or whatever you want to call them, a sharplet, a winglet. People call them different things, but that's the official term. If you're looking at it and thinking, I think I've seen that before, well, actually, it's where it all started for Airbus in terms of this design, because it was later used on the A320 and on a lot of other Airbus aircraft, but this was the first one to be fitted with a design like this. Now, if we keep focusing on this area, I absolutely love the glass you can see the lights inside the glass here on the front and the back. It's quite a unique item for the A310, as the strobe lights actually aren't on the rear of the aircraft, they're on the end of the wings and they flash backwards. Strange design, but that's how they did it. Now, if we move forward along the wing, we can see the slats and all the details we tried to put on the top and the bottom of the wing just to try and bring the aircraft to life. Now, if we power up the aircraft with the hydraulics and put the slats and the flaps down, you can start to see how some of these areas sort of more expand and come into the landing configuration. I just think it looks really, really nice in this whole area, especially when you look through from a wing view from the cabin, which we'll come to later. Now, moving along the forward part of the fuselage, you can see some more of this grime, wear details just below the front door, which is called the door one left. Now, you might think, what's this sort of black mark here? Well, what it's for is when a jet bridge or stairs are attached to the aircraft, often they bump into the aircraft, and that's what that is. It's endless cycles of people just bumping into the aircraft and leaving a little bit of rubber behind, and we've captured that in the A310. Now, at the forward of the flight deck, you can see that we have this kind of crinkled effect. Now, oil canning is another word for it, but where it comes from is the A310s are quite old airframes, and they've been pressurized, depressurized, pressurized, depressurized, and where this sort of airframe comes to a point, there's more pressure put on it, so you can kind of see where it starts to bulge out over time. This is completely normal, but basically every single A310 ever now has this effect on it, so we thought we'd capture that and show it in the sim. And I think it looks, again, really nice, especially if you capture it just in the sunlight right. Nose wheel area, again, like you say, if we're doing sort of a walk around, we can really read the details that are on the gear here, and we can look at the tyres and even read the tyres, really. I really just love looking at this aircraft from the outside. Now, that was really quite a quick tour of the exterior of the A310. Let's make our way inside and check out the cabin. Okay, let's talk about the cabin on the A310. Now, it's a split configuration, first class and economy, with a total of 238 seats, which is pretty good for an aircraft with a 12-hour range. Now, areas that we've really focused on are the materials on the seats, and you can really look, to me it really looks like leather. I know that's the point, but it really does. And I really just love how these first class and these economy seats have come out and they look in the sim. We've also got some interaction that is available in the cabin. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, if you're in the flight deck and you turn on the no smoking sign or the seatbelt sign, they actually come on in the cabin, which I think is a really neat feature. You'll also hear the chime when you're in the cabin. Along with this, you might have spotted the screens that are on the back of all of the passenger seats. Now, these are not simply just a static image. This is actually a screen. So when you take off and you have your flight programmed, it will tell you information about your flight, distance to go, altitude that you're cruising at, things that you would see as a passenger when you're flying on a real A310. But it allows you to sit back here during the cruise and monitor the flight from the comfort of your first class seat. Now, I think that's a pretty cool feature, and I'm just really pleased with how that's come out. That was a really quick tour of the cabin. I just really go in the sim and have a look for yourself, because it's a really nice experience just to walk around and see it. Now, let's talk about the flight deck on the A310. What are some of the things that we've done to really make the flight deck stand out? Well, we spent a lot of time modeling switches, buttons, all these sort of things across the flight deck to look really crystal clear, even when you're close up to them. So as you can see now, even when you're right up close to these, they still look really good. So when you have your head in the normal position, everything really looks good. The fire handles as well, they have a nice little catch that you can open and close, and you can see that the safety wire gets removed. All these little details are included. Another one we went for are the screens. Now, the screens are a CRT type screen. So what does this mean? It basically means that they are physically curved on their face with a piece of glass in front of them. Now, we've modeled that, so we have the piece of glass and the screen is curved, and we project over the top of that, and that's the same for the flight management system as well. So they're all in there, and I think it gives a really nice effect when you look at it. Now, fonts and sort of spacing and things like that, we spent a long time getting this as accurate as possible. I believe we've got around 10 or 15, maybe more, custom fonts throughout the entire aircraft. So there's a specific font for this type of page, there's a specific font for this sort of flight control unit, etc, etc. But what you really need to know is when you look around the aircraft, it just looks like the real thing. And I really like that. It adds a lot of just immersion, you know, when you can check out videos and think, oh yeah, it does look like that. Because let's check out the backlight on this control unit at the top, which is for the autopilot. You can see each one of them isn't quite the same color, because each of these screens over 20 or 30 years of use fade at a different rate. And we've simulated that. It is a subtle thing, but it's very cool once you notice it, and there are multiple things like that throughout the flight deck. Taking a look at the floor and the carpet as well, I really think this does look like an aircraft carpet. It's definitely not the cleanest, but that's also pretty accurate to the real aircraft. I just think it looks great. Now, I could talk about the flight deck for a long time. I just suggest you get inside the aircraft and take a look at it, because it's a really immersive place to be. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to do a very quick power up of the aircraft from cold and dark. Now what we're focusing on here are the sounds that we've got in the A310. Now these recordings are actually taken from a real A310 with multiple different sounds for the same switch. So most of the times when you interact with the switch, you're going to hear a very unique or different sound for that interaction. So let's get on with that. Okay, so let's talk about where this video series is going to go. Now, it's going to continue as a tutorial on how to use the A310, but it's going to be split into two different types of video. The first type is called the new to airliners, and the second type is called the returning to airliners. Now, what's the difference between these series? With the new to airliners series, it's designed for someone who's flown maybe general aviation aircraft, who's been in Microsoft Flight Simulator and has an interest in an airliner but has never flown one before. So we're going to keep terms more broad, and we're going to skip over some of the real finite details to get you up and going with the aircraft, and we're going to exclusively use the in-sim checklist system, which is fully integrated with the A310. Now, the returning to airliner series is going to be for, as the name would suggest, someone who's used to an airliner but not how to operate the A310. With that, we're going to go a bit more in depth with how things work. We're going to use the checklists inside the EFB, and we're going to look at more of flows and things like that than rather relying on just the in-sim checklist system. So we do hope you join with those videos to show you how to get started with the A310 no matter what your experience level. Thank you very much for watching this video, and we hope you can enjoy the A310 in your sim soon.